Webinar number 48. We are almost in the half stage of the 100 free webinars. Century Webinarathon provided by the Academy of Orthopedic Manual Physical Therapists. With immense pleasure as the Chief Instructor of the Academy and also as the core instructor providing all the manual therapy programs of the Academy, Professor Senthil P. Kumar, I invite you to this revolutionary webinar. I am going to highlight the pattern recognition model, of course along a pathomechanical approach for cervical spine musculoskeletal disorders. I am going to provide an outline. I want more queries and questions from all of you because these are interactive webinars and they are free webinars. Tomorrow and day after is the actual course that is part of the certification in spinal manual therapy, where we are having manual therapy for neck pain. Okay, the conditions which are associated with the cervical spine, how to administer the manual techniques. Okay, so today's webinar, I do not wish to discuss about the treatments because the treatment techniques are demonstrated tomorrow and day after. So those who are watching now, remember that cervical spine, first and foremost, the conditions which are of alarming scenarios. Sometimes you might consider them as red flags for some treatments or even for diagnostic tests. It may be a red flag. There are two conditions in the neck, cervical spine. One, vertebrobasilar insufficiency, popularly called as the VBI. It's a vascular disorder, arterial problem. The other condition is the instability of the cervical spine. You have, for example, ligaments, capsules, excessive laxity, and you have excessive movements and leading to patient symptoms. Okay, tissue injury and leading to patient symptoms. So one is the vascular condition, the other one is the instability. Of course, the fractures definitely mean that, in the recent stage, when it is in the healing stage, it is going to be as a red flag for movements. But the static techniques or myofascial techniques, which is little far away from the fracture site, absolutely it's fine. And you will involve treatment techniques which will involve the upper limb. Okay, so you can use manual techniques like neural techniques, which is to upper limb, even in a cervical spine fracture. Okay, because you are not moving the neck, you can definitely use. And of course, the other probable serious condition other than the fracture dislocations, of course dislocation will come under the instabilities, okay, and ligamentous and capsule injuries and instabilities, the second category, and the third category is the vertebrobasilar insufficiencies. Okay, another which is a neurovascular condition, more lower down the neck, more little bit next level, the serious one is the thoracic outlet syndrome. Okay, so I am going to talk about these disorders as the most serious and then going to the next ones. Okay, in fact, other kind of a supposedly red flag condition for manual therapy in the cervical spine is the cervical myelopathy. But of course, it's the compression of the spinal cord. Okay, and if there is more damage to the spinal cord, we will have paralysis of both the upper limbs and the lower limbs, leading to quadriplegia. The spinal cord also controls the bladder and the bowel function, so urination or passing stools, a lot of stigma. Okay, we have problems with that, so we cannot just play around with the patient who is having myelopathy. But of course, in myelopathy also there is a research which is used, the neural mobilizations. In myelopathy also soft tissue techniques are not contraindicated. Okay, and also upper limb or lower limb neural techniques will not be contraindicated. Okay, only articular techniques might be contraindicated or maybe a red flag. Okay, so always remember this. But we try to see that the serious ones first, the less serious, and then the comfortable ones, and then the easiest conditions last. Okay, and in the first one, cervical myelopathy, it's recognized by the presence of upper motor neuron symptoms and signs, which includes spinal shock. So if there was a sudden compression to the spinal cord and the patient is within the early period after the injury, which is mostly after the road traffic accidents or even cervical spine fractures like burst fractures of the vertebra, canal, anything around the canal, if there is a fracture which can affect the spinal cord, okay, traumatic spinal cord injury. Cervical myelopathy can come after a disc bulge or disc prolapse, which is a massive disc prolapse. And also, of course, ligament injuries, okay, which is like a dislocation, can actually create a traction on the spinal cord or can shear, okay, produce a shear force on the spinal cord or the torsional force on the spinal cord. Okay. So these kind of instabilities also can affect the spinal cord. Fractures can affect the spinal cord. Of course, spinal cord lesions are also there. You might have dura mater, arachnoid membrane, and the pia mater. The meninges are there. The meninges can go for a strain, okay, dural strain, okay, which can be closely associated either with a sudden hyperflexion injury, okay, or hyperextension and retraction, okay, like hanging. So these are all pathomechanical part of the myelopathy. Okay. Compressive myelopathies are maybe secondary to malignancies and infections of the spinal canal, so that can also compress the spinal cord. In the spinal shock, flaccid, hypotonic. So absolutely the upper limb or the lower limbs will be like loose and you are moving it, you feel like the limbs are not there only. Okay. Of course, this is the tone aspect, but the sensation also. Patients will not feel the sensation below the neck. Okay. So imagine that it's the level of the injury that determines the level of functional ability. C4 is the cutoff. Below that, if the injury is there, at least the patient will be able to breathe, because phrenic nerve supplied at the level of C4, the root value, diaphragm. So diaphragm is the main breathing muscle, okay, inspiratory muscle. If diaphragm is not working, the patient will be having labored breathing. Okay. They will be breathing more from the face and from the neck, but they cannot breathe from the chest or from the abdomen. Okay, so that is something which is a very, very condition which will require sometimes intubation, mechanical ventilation. Okay, you have a machine and then you give so that the ventilation and the perfusion, the oxygen exchange and the air entry will match, so that patient will not go for a hypoxia, hypoxemia and developing a cardiac complication later. Okay, so remember that the level of the injury matters. Whereas T4 level, if you are having injuries, you can suspect that above that, if the injury is there, you can suspect autonomic dysreflexias. Okay, there will be uncontrolled raise in the blood pressure, heart rate, body temperature, in response to any sensory stimuli below that level of the injury, the T4. Okay, if it is injured at T2, definitely it will have more. Okay, T6, of course, the literature tells, but remember T4 you keep it more at a safer level for autonomic dysreflexias. That is another medical emergency. Myelopathies will be associated, mild cases will be associated with balance issues. Patient will feel that they are not able to walk properly, okay? They are not able to stand properly, postural control, and they are not able to use their upper limbs and lower limbs as much as they could have expected it to be. I was also telling about the bladder and bowel, so urination and motion, the passing stools, again that also will be a big disturbance in patients with myelopathy. Spinal shock, that is the initial response of the spinal cord to any kind of an injury. That lasts for, sometimes in some patients it will last for even 3 years. Okay, so you cannot tell. During the spinal shock, it's totally flaccid. You will not know that it is an upper motor neuron injury at all, except that you do the Babinski sign. So you assess stroking from the heel lateral border of the foot and then to the great toe. So you stroke like this as a sensory stimulus quickly, okay, and the great toe will extend the toe, okay. It's called as the plantar response upgoing. If that is present, UMN, upper motor neuron lesion, okay. But sometimes the Babinski sign cannot be elicited. In that time, you assess the bulbocavernosus reflex or perianal sensation, okay, perivaginal sensations, because these are supplied by the innermost part of the spinal cord, okay, and they have root values of S2, 3, S4, like that, sacral, okay. If they are affected, you can confidently tell that it is a complete spinal cord injury, which requires surgical intervention immediately or strict contraindication to local manual therapy, okay, red flag. So remember that the patient has to be rehabilitated across the neuro rehab approach functionally, and using wheelchair or transfer techniques, okay. So ADL, activities of daily living training, okay. So the whole rehab perspective changes, okay, if there is a spinal cord injury, complete spinal cord injuries. Spinal shock, if it is disappeared or it is resolving, body is taking over from the emergency phase, then bulbocavernosus reflex will be intact, okay. So if the reflex is absent, you can be sure that it's a complete spinal cord injury, okay. So myelopathy, disc bulge also can cause myelopathy. So the symptoms can come in upper limb and lower limb, okay. So you need to rule this out by further investigations, which will require radiological workup, including MRI, or it could be myelography. It's outdated, but you have even X-rays for the fracture. So different methods, and including the electrodiagnostic testing, okay. So which will tell about the F response or the H reflex, okay. So there are a lot of procedures, electromyography activity of the muscles which are in upper motor neuron lesion, okay, the spontaneous activity which presents, or insertional activity when you are inserting an EMG electrode, okay. So lots of procedures are there. So after myelopathy, of course, I was telling you about the fractures. Fractures of cervical spine, usually they occur with high impact fall, trauma, okay, road traffic accidents, object falling on the head, and it may be associated with loss of consciousness or even traumatic brain injuries, okay. So again, in that scenario, you don't need an investigation to confirm that it's a fracture. Any person who had a fall, and if you see that the head has got hit on a surface or an object, okay, during the fall, that means cervical spine will go into an abnormal position and the injury can happen, okay, to the cervical vertebrae. Assume that the cervical vertebrae is injured, immobilize with the Philadelphia collar, okay, and then only you transport the patient, because if there is a partial fracture, your negligence should not cause a complete fracture, okay, and single level fracture should not become a multiple level fractures, okay. Of course, the CT scan, the computer tomography scans will tell clearly about the fracture location and the area. Only the CT scan can rule out the fractures, not the MRI, not the traditional X-rays, okay. Of course, better is actually to do the CT scan, but if you're not doing the CT scan, then neurological function, the ability of the patient to move the upper limb, the sensation whether they can feel in the upper limb or the lower limbs, orientation, obeying commands, okay. There is no symptoms in the neck, okay. So absolutely you can tell that it may not be a major injury, but still you will take precaution to immobilize the cervical spine minimum for 6 weeks, okay. Then only you will again recheck functionally how much well the patient is progressing. So remember, During the 6 weeks, you will assess the spinal shock, bulbocavernous reflex, or the bladder bowel functions. Okay, keep monitoring because you need not be ignorant. Okay, miss that occult or hidden spinal cord injuries. Okay. Next, of course, after the fracture can happen anywhere, any level. You can have cervical spine fractures. You have conditions of anterior wedge compression fractures, which is in the vertebral body anteriorly. Hyperflexion or flexion compression injuries. Axial compression injuries, okay, weight falling on the head or a person falling upside down will create burst fracture, which includes the anterior portion of the vertebral body and the posterior portion of the vertebral body. Both are multiple fragments, which is likely to actually compress the spinal cord. Minor fractures might be only the anterior portion, vertebral body, superiorly fracture or inferiorly fractures of the vertebral body margin. Superior margin of the vertebral body anteriorly, if it goes for fracture in a hyperflexion injury, it's called as the jackknife fracture. J-A-C-K, jackknife fracture. Whereas the inferior portion of the anterior margin of the vertebral body, if it goes for a fracture, it's called as the teardrop fracture. Teardrop, okay, fracture. That's the anterior portion, the fractures. When you are having posteriorly, okay, you can have fracture of the pars interarticularis. It is the portion of the bone between the superior articulating process and the inferior articulating process, which is responsible for preventing listhesis or slipping of the vertebra. Okay. If that pars interarticularis is fractured, traumatic spondylolisthesis. Okay. That is again caused by hyperextension or extension compression injuries. Okay. In a hyperflexion, sometimes the spinous processes are there. So, avulsion of the interspinous ligament, which will create a tip of the spinous process to get fracture, which is called as Clay-Chauvelur's fracture. Okay. So, hyperflexion, hyperextension injuries, if these are combined with rotation and distraction, okay, the weight of the helmet, for example, can produce a distraction for a two-wheeler bike rider. Okay. So that can happen with rotation and distractions, will create facet dislocations. Okay. However, you cannot see the mechanism of injury very clearly, okay, because we are not sitting with the subject during the accidents. But of course, when you are working up on the area of injury, you know that this is should be the mechanism. And once you have diagnosed the pathomechanics, those movements have to be delayed. It should be done after 3 months only. You want the fractures to heal. Some of these fractures which are affecting the spinal cord or the nerve root and creating debilitating pain or bladder and bowel functions affected require immediate surgery, cervical spine. Okay. You might do decompressive surgeries, removing the fragments. Not you, the orthopedic surgeon, the spinal surgeon. And of course, you will also try to see for stabilization surgeries. You can keep plate and screws, you can keep wiring between the spinous process, interspinous wiring. You can also keep Harrington rod fixations for multiple level fractures. Okay. Wedge compression fracture, no need to do anything much. It's most common in a pathological fracture, like after osteoporosis or cervical spondylosis. Anteriorly the vertebra will get compressed. That is the wedge compression fracture. It does not involve any major neurological insult or vascular injuries that will indicate a surgery. Okay? So it's not needed for that. So remember about this kind of a scenario. So myelopathy and then trauma, the fractures. Of course, dislocations. Specific fractures, C1 fractures. You have Jefferson's fracture. C1 is like a ring-shaped structure. Okay, the first cervical vertebra. Okay, the first bone. And this goes into 4 fragments: anteriorly, posteriorly, right side, left side. Explodes. Okay, this fracture is otherwise called as the quadrate fracture, 4-point fracture, Jefferson's fracture. Skull is impacting on the atlas, and the atlas explodes in all the directions. Okay? It's very nice to hear the description, but this fracture is the most troublesome fracture of all the spine fractures. Okay, Jefferson's fracture. Next, of course, is the axis, the second cervical vertebra, which has the odontoid process. Fracture odontoid can happen. Type 1, tip of the odontoid. 2, body of the odontoid. 3, body with the base of the odontoid. Okay, vertebral body, axis. Type 3. And axis, the pars intra-articularis is there of the axis posteriorly between the articular surfaces, facet joints. Up it forms the atlantoaxial, down it forms the C2, C3 facet joint. In between there is the pars intra-articularis. If there is fracture, there will be a listhesis of the axis, slipping of the axis anteriorly. Mostly it happens with the extension and distraction, which happens in hanging, okay, as a punishment or as suicide. Okay, so it's called as the hangman's fracture dislocation. It's a fracture pars intra-articularis with a traumatic spondylolisthesis of C2 on C3. So get that picture there. Okay, so there again, that is again the next serious fracture. After the Jefferson's fracture is the hangman's fracture dislocation. Then you come to all the other cervical spine fractures which I was describing until now. So remember the seriousness of this and the extent of the neurological injury that can occur together with this, and the traumatic brain injury that can get missed. If you find a cervical spine fracture, don't think that you are diagnosed. Okay, you should see that there can be the traumatic brain injury, there can be cranium fractures, base of the cranium fractures. Base of the cranium fractures will involve 3 scenarios. One is ENT bleed. You know ENT doctors, ENT physicians, otorhinolaryngologist. Okay, ear, nose, throat. Okay, so you can have bleeding from the nose, you can have bleeding from the ears. Okay, bleeding from the nose or leakage of the cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid is present in the subarachnoid space, the 3 meninges, pia mater, arachnoid membrane and dura mater. 3 layers are there. And there is also cavities inside the brain, ventricles. They are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. It's a nutrition fluid for the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. That fluid will leak. Rhinorrhea means leaking of the CSF. CSF has RBC, so you will have red color. It will look like bleeding through the nose. You might think it's only a nasal bone fracture or peripheral. No, rule out it's CSF or not. In an emergency care setting, physician is available or not available, nurses, you should also be part of this team, which is not only involving resuscitation, you have an intubation and then you try to support the cardiopulmonary functioning so that the patient is brought to a stable condition. Not only that, but also ensure the associated signs that is missed by junior level residents. Okay, you have otorrhea, leaking of the CSF through the ears. Okay, because the base of the brain fracture, base of the skull fracture. So hematemesis, vomiting of the blood. So throat also blood, ear blood, nose also blood. So remember, do not miss this. You should always ask in the history, was there any ENT blood, ENT bleeding? Okay. And the next, of course, if it was the patient was transported by other people or caretakers, we should ask them that was there any bleeding, was the patient conscious? Okay. Patient is conscious, then you can ask the patient, you can interact with the patient. Talking is not a main problem unless there is fracture of the mandible, okay, coexisting. The next scenario when you come for after the fractures and the dislocations is the instability. Okay. Of course, before going to instability, I would like to see the vertebrobasilar insufficiency and the thoracic outlet syndromes. Because vertebrobasilar insufficiency is a big scenario. Why? Because the artery passes through the foramen transverse area and then come to the arch of the atlas, where it goes behind like this at 90 degree, okay, and then enters the foramen magnum, unites to form the basilar artery, the single one, and then the basilar artery divides into two branches and they form the posterior cerebral artery. Okay? The posterior circulation of the circle of Willis, the anastomosis, arterial anastomosis, which supplies the brain. So vertebrobasilar insufficiency, don't think it's a pathology just of the neck. If you are ignoring, it will create posterior cerebral artery stroke, PCA, stroke. And the posterior cerebral artery supplies the occipital lobe associated with vision. So patients can go blind. Okay? So remember that you are going to see a situation to rule out vertebrobasilar insufficiency. Patients with symptoms. What are the symptoms? From a reclining position, suddenly the patient comes upright, then the symptoms come. Okay? So from lying down position, if sudden sitting, it might come. Sitting position to standing also it will come. Basically, it's the arterial blood supply to the brain which is actually slowed down. Okay? Because of positions. You might think it's a postural hypotension, change of postures, drop in the blood pressure, blood pooling in the lower limb, so the blood is not going to this. But remember, this is associated with the cervical spine movements. If you are doing extension of the neck, it narrows the blood flow to both the vertebral arteries. If you do rotation to my right side, left side vertebral artery gets blocked or slowed down in circulation. Of course, the anastomosis ensures that from the other side there is blood circulation which will be going on to the brain. But if you hold the position for 10 seconds, it will reproduce the patient's symptoms. Okay? What are the symptoms? Dizziness. Okay? Dizziness in terms of you are seeing like losing balance. Okay? Or it is characteristically described as giddiness. Okay? After which, the next D, diplopia, double vision. If you have too much of alcohol, for example, you might find everybody has another ghost image. Okay? Double vision, that is diplopia. Next, D, dysphagia, difficulty in swallowing. No need to give anything to the subject and you want to ask them to swallow. Normally itself they will tell, I feel like I have a lumpness in my throat. Something is blocking my throat. When I talk it is difficult. When I swallow, my saliva itself is not going inside very smoothly. That is dysphagia. Of course, dysarthria, difficulty in articulation of the speech. When I speak like this, you cannot make out what I am telling. You can listen that there is sound or but you cannot say that there is a word formation. So when I talk like this, where you can see that there is sound production but there is no word formation. Sound production is phonation, word formation is articulation. That articulation, dysarthria, difficulty in articulating and producing the word formation, that is the articulation problem, that is dysarthria. So you have dizziness, diplopia, dysphagia, dysarthria. The fifth D and the last D, the symptom is the draw patterns. Okay? The subject was standing, sitting, listening to you, you turn and see the subject is flat. And when you are asking the description, the subject tells that it's a black screen which came and covered their eyes all of a sudden and they When they woke up, they are on the floor. Okay? It might even aggravate into transient ischemic attack, the early stage of stroke, cerebrovascular accidents. So these 5 days, any of these symptoms with change of positions or with neck movements will strongly point that the patient has vertebral basilar insufficiency. Okay? You need not do the test, the VBI test, which is involving the extension or the rotations, and after that the extension and rotations performed in standing or sitting or supine line. Okay? So this condition requires gentleness in handling for articular techniques. If a patient is having VBI, upper cervical articular techniques are contraindicated, red flags. Myofascial and neural, no problem. Okay? Lower cervical thrust manipulation techniques, grade 5 manipulation, high velocity low amplitude thrust techniques, grade 5 is contraindicated in lower cervical. Mobilizations, no problem, lower cervical, you can do that. So articular techniques are not as per contraindicated in VBI in lower cervical. Okay? Only the thrust techniques are contraindicated because literature has reported incidents of stroke in the therapeutic environment upon application of thrust techniques in patients with VBI. The next scenario, VBI implications, rotations, end range rotation techniques should be taken with precautions. Of course, combination of these positions, you should not position the patient in a combined position like this and give even Maitland's graded mobilizations also. Although the techniques are very safe to reassess and check, still do not take the chance when the VBI test is positive. Okay? You will not be bothered about facet joint syndrome, extension, lateral flexion and rotation to quadrant position, or the radiculopathy, Sperling's test position, because all this combined position of extension and rotation contraindicated because the patient has VBI. Clear? So remember, mechanically you try to relate. It's not that the condition means it's contraindicating. It is the mechanics, the positioning, the movement testing, combined movements. So specific things are contraindicated. Individual movements may not be contraindicated. Flexion is not contraindicated. Lateral flexion is not contraindicated. Okay? Rotation, mid-range, not contraindicated. Last only. So be clear about this picture. Okay? And then see how we can implicate from the symptoms and how pathomechanically we can plan so that how much examination to do and what interventions could be planned. Okay? Manual interventions. In the lesser side of the instability, what is called as ligament strains, ligament sprains. Okay? Classically, whiplash associated disorders. Cervical spine, seat belt, driving the car very fast, showing it live, the odometer 120, 140 kilometers per hour, you're showing it live, okay, in the camera, phone, and you see that you have missed the turn and you have hit the median. Okay? And once the impact is done, your head goes forwards, and then because of the inertia, it goes into hyperextension and then finally comes into flexion. So it's a hyperflexion followed by hyperextension and then a flexion. It's like an action of a whip. So that's why it's called as whiplash associated disorders. The ligament injury can happen in the upper cervical or it can happen in the lower cervical, mostly as a sudden injury, which is a sprain of the ligaments or partial tear or complete tear of the ligaments. Predominantly these instabilities, whether they will contraindicate articular techniques, remember, whenever there is a excessive movement it is called as hypermobility. When this excessive movement of the joint injures the capsule, because every joint has a capsule, that capsule is injured or that associated ligaments which are attached to the capsule, supporting the capsule, they got injured, then you can suspect that there is, because of the injury there will be an inflammation, and because of inflammation, excessive inflammatory exudates irritating the free nerve endings, there will be pain. That stage you will tell it as anterior instability or lateral instability, okay, or rotational instabilities. Okay? Depends on the direction of the movement that is excessive and the tissue damage that is there. So hypermobility should be differentiated from instability. Hypermobility means all directions, excessive movements. There is no injury, there is no pain. Instability means injury to tissues and pain. Okay? After that, of course, the subluxations, which happen like out of contact and then it comes back during the movement. Okay, so moves out of contact, comes back. Out of contact, comes back. Okay, that is subluxation, which will be associated eventually with clicks. Clicks that can come in the end of the range and then coming back, nothing. Go back, again clicks, come back. In dislocation, the surfaces go out of contact, comes back into contact with a loud sound if it is reducible dislocations. So the initial one might be a louder click, and after that when it is returning, it will be a blunt sound of clunk. Okay? Clunk is a more larger volume. Okay? So you see a click with a clunk, you know it is a dislocation that is reducing. Same kind of an instability after degeneration of the joint, facet joint degeneration or disc degenerations. Because of the degeneration, initial phases, excessive synovial fluid will be formed, and because of the synovial fluid being more in the facet joints, instability will be there or hypermobility will be there. So in that scenario, that instability will create crepitus. Crepitus is short sounds throughout the movement. Okay, okay, crepitus. Tick, 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 clicks. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Subluxation or dislocations with a clunk. Okay, the louder one. So try to differentiate. Even in the crepitus also, audible crepitus which you can hear is from the bony osteophytes, syndesmophytes, bony loose bodies. That's why it's audible. Some crepitus is not audible. The patient will tell that there are sounds when I am turning. You cannot hear anything. When you keep the hand, you will feel vibration, okay, at that joint. So that is soft crepitus, fine crepitus, because articular cartilage, meniscoid, intra-articular meniscoid is there in the facet joint, that loose bodies, the fibrocartilage. So hyaline cartilage or the fibrocartilage, loose bodies, cartilage loose bodies will create fine crepitus, which is only palpable crepitus, not audible. Osteophytes, syndesmophytes, bony partners means bony degeneration means audible, not palpable is okay, it's just an added finding. Okay. So remember, everything goes into the picture of recognizing a particular pattern, whether it is a myelopathy, whether it is associated traumatic brain injuries, and then next coming to vascular, the vertebrobasilar insufficiencies, fractures, cervical spine and the associated dislocations, or the minimal range of ligament whiplash associated disorders, or the ligamentous instabilities, or the articular instabilities because of degenerations. Okay? So this is the whole spectrum. I am covering this as part 1. The rest of the disorders will be covered as part of tomorrow's program. So remember, those who are listening and those who are watching this video, the extent and the depth of the content which you will be receiving as part of the CSMT also and also as part of the manual therapy for cervical spine disorders. Even including these conditions of VBI, whiplash associated disorders, there are manual therapy techniques, okay, which we can safely use in these patients in order to get the best outcome functionally that is possible out of people. So opening now the session for questions and queries and clarifications from members, especially Dr. Ritu ma'am, who's our senior member, who's a OC, OMT and MCMT completed. And we have, I think, Dr. Uday Mala, who's always a regular participant of all this webinarathon. Dr. Anup Sharma, sir also attended the previous one. There are other huge range of students who should consider joining the AOMPT and enrolling into the video courses. And if your working area is neck disorders and manual therapy is your passion, do not miss the tomorrow and day after manual therapy for cervical spine disorders. Of course, over to all of you. Go ahead with your questions. There was a question that was asked by Dr. Ritu yesterday about the red flag. Okay. So that was the one which is inspiration for today's session. Okay, to tell about these conditions, because as physical therapist you should know which are the regions which you can confidently do, that is the green flags, but which are the situations which you should take precaution, because that if you don't know, you are likely to create disasters, okay, clinical disasters, okay, and patients will legally also sue you. Okay, so over to the participants for their questions. Okay. We have a very busy Friday evening. I know the number of participants who are watching this session live, and of course the later in the night everyone watches the videos, and I am really amazed by the response that I got for the neuromanual therapy webinar video, which has reached nearly 2.5k, 2,500 views. Okay, so more than the views or the likes what we get on Facebook, what is important is the change that AOMPT can bring in your professional life and career. So join the paid courses and you will see the world of difference. Okay. Over to you for questions. So I just wait for the participants to ask some questions. We have Dr. Pooja Digra, who is also part of the core committee, executive committee, deputy chairperson. Go ahead with your questions, and if there are no questions, I would be concluding this webinar now. Soft crepitus are the indication of degeneration of disc. It is not for disc. Okay, you are seeing for facet joint. I was telling articular cartilage. Okay, in the disc cartilaginous end plates, it is there. Loose bodies from that, it's very rare. Okay, you usually get syndesmophytes, the margin of the vertebral bodies, or oncovertebral joints. They go for degeneration, and you might get a hard crepitus or the coarse crepitus, the audible crepitus. Okay. Palpable crepitus from disc is very rare. Palpable crepitus comes from facet joint. Okay. If you cannot listen with the ears, use your stethoscope. Keep the stethoscope, you can definitely hear. Okay. Even if there is a myositis ossificans, a soft tissue calcification, calcific tendinitis, supraspinatus, crepitus is there. In the early stage, it will be fine crepitus. You may not be able to hear, so you can keep the stethoscope. Okay. Listen by hearing, identify by palpation. You are not going to listen by palpation. Okay, so remember that. Clear? Listened by directly audible as I was making the sounds. Okay, so we are almost there and we are ready to close the session. I appreciate your presence and wish you all the very best. The participants, Dr. Ritu, Dr. Udayamala, who have registered for the CSMT and they are going to attend tomorrow and day after sessions live. I really wish them the best for this weekend. Enjoy the sessions. And the rest of the participants who are AOMPT members, please take the videos of the sessions so that it will help you in your clinical practice. Right? So good luck to you all. Enjoy your Friday night and have a very productive weekend.